What can I get for you? I guess I'll have Sauvignon Blanc because I've heard of it and I know what to expect then. Have you ever had rosé? It's really good. You should try it. Hi friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Claire and today's video is going to be all about dismissing and debunking some myths and misconceptions you may have about rosé wine. So late spring is the perfect time of year to talk about rosé because all of the wines that were made in the harvest last year, 2016, are bottled and being released now in late May 2017. You may have noticed this in a lot of grocery stores that sell wine, or if you live somewhere that doesn't sell wine in the grocery store, and other stores that sell wine have these beautiful cases and displays of rosé wine. The first misconception a lot of people have about rosé wine is that it is all sugary and syrupy and sweet. Rosé wines, like any other type of wine, can range from very, very dry to super sugary and sweet. I should explain that there is a pretty big difference between wines that are fruit forward and wines that are really sweet. Rosé wines often have a lot of fruit flavors and aromas in them. So they smell and taste like cherries, strawberries, other red fruits, and oftentimes flowers. And that is very different from them tasting really sugary. Residual sugar is what's left over from the fermentation process. So yeast takes the sugar in grape juice and converts it to alcohol. That's how we get wine. That's how fermentation works. Rosé wines that are produced in the Provence region of France actually have to have a very small amount of residual sugar. The next misconception a lot of people have about rosé wine is that they are simply red wines and white wines mixed together. Most rosé wines are made with the intention of being rosé wines. What happens is when red grapes, black grapes, are crushed, their juices are left to mingle with the skins from the grapes they are crushed from for a relatively short amount of time. The pigment in a grape is all in the skin. It's not in the inner part. So you can see this even when you take like a Concord grape from the grocery store. When you bite into it, even though the color might be really dark purple or red around the outside, the inside remains pretty white and almost like light green and pretty much has no color at all. That's what happens with rosé wines. Winemakers typically just crush the red grapes, black grapes, and they leave the juice that's produced from this crushing in contact with the skins for a very short amount of time. The second way that rosé wines are made is from a method called saignée. This method is when the red or black grapes are crushed and the juice that comes from this pressing is allowed to mingle with the grape skins, so it turns that kind of pinkish color. And before it becomes red wine, so before the juice is left to ferment with the skins for a long period of time, some of the wine is taken off the top. So that's how you get rosé wine. It's actually pretty similar to the first method. The third way that rosé wines are produced is by actually blending red wine and white wine together to create a pinkish color. This method, however, isn't as common. The next misconception about rosé wine is that you can only drink this wine during the hot summer months. I think this might have something to do with the fact that rosé wines are released right at the end of spring when it starts to get warm outside. Also, rosés tend to be pretty easy drinking wines, so they're very relaxing. So when it's hot outside and you just want to sit on your patio, or if you're going to a barbecue, any outdoor event, rosé wines tend to be something that a lot of people consume during those times. But I should mention, this is false because a lot of countries, like France for instance, People consume rosé all year round. I drink rosé all year round. I love rosé, and there's no reason that you can't have like a bonfire in the fall and sit around and have some rosé. Wines aren't exclusive like that. The next misconception is one that I think is absolutely ridiculous in the year 2017. It's that manly men can't drink pink. They can't drink rosé wine. In this day and age, whoever you are and wherever you fall on the spectrum of femininity to masculinity, you should be allowed to drink whatever you want, whenever you want, because rosé wine is so good. There's no reason that men can't drink rosé. In fact, there's a festival in Spain where men specifically drink rosé wine. The next myth about rosé wine is that it simply cannot be aged. You have to get it and drink it immediately. The reason why this myth is not always true is that there are some exceptions to every rule. As I learned in French class when I was a teenager, the exception makes the rule. Actually, a lot of rosé wines are meant to be drunk immediately. That's kind of the whole point of them. That's why they're consumed in the summertime when they're released. But some rosé wines can be aged, particularly those from certain regions in France. Some wine regions like Provence make rosé wine specifically to be aged. The other example of when you can age rosé is rosé champagne. The next myth about rosé wines that I think needs to be dismissed is that rosé has only been around since the 1970s, when the wine regions in California made them popular. In the 1970s, that was around the time when UC Berkeley and Napa kind of created this really cool relationship, and thanks to technology, American and California wines really became amazing. And Americans tended to like what we know as white Zinfandel or blush wines, and those wines became really popular around that time. But pink wine and rosé wine has actually been around for thousands of years. Wines that are pink have been around for a very long time. For instance, the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans made and drank rosé wine. It was considered very sophisticated. The next myth about rosé wines is that they all have a really low alcohol content. The reason why this myth simply isn't true kind of goes hand in hand with what I was talking about before when it comes to rosé and sweetness, and I was talking about fermentation. When wines are fermented and a lot of their residual sugar in the juice is eaten up by yeast and converted to alcohol, there's not a ton of residual sugar left. Hence, a lot of that sugar has been converted to alcohol. So a lot of rosé wines, if they're on the drier side, which most of them are, as we've already addressed, they will have a higher alcohol content. Rosé wines that have a lower alcohol content tend to be on the sweeter side. The next myth I want to dispel about rosé wine is that rosé wine is cheap and therefore doesn't merit appreciation like other wines may. Like any other wine, like white wine or red wine, you can get really cheap, crappy rosés, and you can get really bomb, amazing rosés to drink. So rosé, the kind of beauty of rosé is that you can get anything to suit your personal individual palate. Rosés are really easy drinking, and pretty much anyone can enjoy them, so they deserve a lot of appreciation. Thanks for sticking with me. We're nearing the end. I hope by this point you're starting to become a little bit more convinced that rosé wine is worth your time, worth your money, and definitely worth a taste. The second to last myth I want to talk about today is that rosé is not a food wine. This means that you cannot have any food when you drink rosé. Rosé is really quaffable. I think that's a British word. That's an amazing word. I should use it more. Quaffable. It has a high acidity content. You can find rosé that's sweet all the way to really bone dry. That means that they go with a huge variety of foods. If you're at a restaurant and you find yourself completely stumped about what kind of wine to match with the food, oftentimes rosé will not let you down. When you don't know what to drink, think pink. The last myth about rosé wine, thank you so much for sticking with me, is that rosé wines are completely déclassé and you can't be fancy and snobby when drinking rosé wine. I mean, a lot of the reason why I wanted to make videos about wine is to kind of dismiss a lot of the snobbery and pretentiousness surrounding wine, because that is a huge misconception that people have about wine, that you have to be fancy and whatever to drink it. Rosé wines have been around for thousands of years. The ancient Romans actually gave red wine to their peasants and the poorer people in their society because they thought they needed the nutrients from the skins in red wine. And the fancy people in ancient Rome would drink pink wine. So I hope you may choose to buy and try rosé wine the next time you have the opportunity to. Please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Cheers!